to other areas of your life. And this will be recorded just so that everybody knows, and hopefully we'll be able to share bits and pieces of it later to the rest of our community members that aren't able to be here today. Before we get started, we're going to start with a land acknowledgement. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with this and the importance of it, especially given the location that we're on with Algoma University. So first, I'd like to acknowledge that the campuses of Algoma University are located on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Mushkegowuk Cree, as well as the hereditary lands of the Métis Nation. I'm currently on the Robertson Huron Treaty Territory, home of Garden River and Batchewana First Nations, and on sacred lands set aside for education as envisioned by Chief Shingwak for our children and for those yet unborn. And for those of you that are joining from other areas, I encourage you to go and look and see what traditional lands you're on if you don't know, and really sit and think about that for a little bit, because when we do these land acknowledgements, it's a lot more important than just acknowledging the land, but understanding the importance of it and the role that it plays in our lives, both now and going forward. And with that, I'd like to give it off to Ozma to say a few words and do a few introductions.
Well, thank you very much, Marissa, and good morning, everyone. Chigajep. It's wonderful to be here today. And, as Marissa was speaking and Krista, I sort of started to reflect. I know I have a speech that has been prepared, but I'm going to go off script for a minute because what we're doing is so important. And I want to acknowledge 4 years ago, when I first came to Algoma, I never saw this. I mean, we had a group that met down in the lower part of the Shingwak complex. And I was able to have coffee a couple of times with the queer community. And I remember some of those early conversations about not necessarily feeling safe at Algoma, or not really feeling like the university understood some of the things that we could be doing to make life much better for the queer community. And I think, as I look at it today and I see Krista's leadership, I see an alumnus in Marissa, and I see the students that are joining us today and community members. We still have a long ways to go, but we're moving in a good direction. And I want to thank all of the people that are here today who've been helping and pushing us and really saying, we can do better. So as I mentioned in the video message that went out yesterday, we are committed as a university to making our spaces safe and more accessible to every member of our community. And this includes welcoming and supporting trans and gender diverse people. I'm really excited that we're here today coming together to celebrate trans success, while at the same time raising awareness about trans issues, transphobia, and how to be a trans ally. I this morning wasn't able to get down to either of our campuses. I'm in transit right now as I prepare to travel, and I'm heading over to Ryerson shortly to sign a partnership agreement. But I heard that the flag raising ceremony was beautiful this morning, and just want to acknowledge that, and also thank everybody who helped and participated and supported this morning. As I mentioned before, I really believe these conversations are important. It's wonderful to see training going on across the university and these kinds of events being organized so people can learn a little bit more. We have an amazing distinguished panel today, and I look forward to getting to know them a little bit better as well. So my job this morning is to introduce this wonderful panel. And we have this morning Kelvin Borden, Tamara Dodds, Dylan Jayasinga, Krista McCracken, and of course our moderator, Marissa DeTuro. And I'll just speak a little bit about each panelist. Kelvin is a plant enthusiast, as I understand, and finds connection with nature through bird watching and bonfires. And he is an entrepreneur in home renovations, enjoys warm walks on the beach and a good joke, and of course, his friends. And Kelvin, we share a lot in common. I shared my bagel with a number of birds this morning in downtown Toronto and just had a glorious time with them. Dylan is one of our international students, and he's studying in the finance and economics department. He is currently OSU's queer and trans representative. Dylan is non-binary, enjoys video games, animation, I don't know how to say this word, which kind of dates me probably, but cosplay or cosplay, and voice acting. And Krista, of course, is a queer, trans, non-binary Algoma University employee, much more than just an employee, I would say. She's an incredible human being. We're lucky to have her as part of our community. They are an award-winning public historian and archivist who works in the Shingwalk Residential School Center. I had the honor of speaking about Krista's work recently when she was honored by the community of Sault Ste. Marie for the work that they were doing in the Shingwalk Residential School Center. And they've done an incredible job leading in that area. When not working, Krista can be found drinking tea, embroidering, and watching Doctor Who. And I'm just going to pause there for a minute because you'll hear me, even as the president, sometimes getting my pronouns mixed up. And I'm working really hard on that, but I acknowledge that I'm still learning and still working hard to be really respectful in this space. And I think it speaks to where a lot of us who are committed to being allies are right now at Algoma. And I thank you for your patience as we're working through. Lastly, but certainly not least, I want to introduce Marissa DeTuro, who I met about 5 years ago, Marissa. And I knew right away she was going to bring an incredible contribution to our community because of her caring attitude and her willingness to jump in. And what I saw was just a feisty, young, incredible human being who wanted to make a difference for the students that were at Algoma, and really pushed me hard as a president to think about things like food security, underrepresented groups and what they needed to be happy, healthy, and included in the university communities. I thank her for all of that work. Some of the things that she's doing now with OSU is coordinating a number of services and equity-based projects. She works very hard in the food security area, in safety, and with queer-related initiatives. Originally from Omaha, Nebraska, she has a passion, as I mentioned, for helping others. And I sometimes run into her on the Lake Superior trails. And sometimes I don't even think she knows about it because she's on that surfboard and doing some pretty courageous activities out there. And sometimes on the ski hill and lots of different places. But it's wonderful to see her fitting into the wider community. Tamara, I don't want to leave Tamara out. Tamara is a 28-year-old writer, aspiring filmmaker, and sometimes an actress. I'm not quite sure what that means. She's been transitioning for about 7 years and is an avid lover of comic books, weird art films, as well as bad action movies. It is an absolute privilege. It's an honor to have been asked to introduce our guests this afternoon for this panel, or I guess it's still this morning. And I look forward to hearing from all of you as we move forward. So thank you again to everyone who has organized today's event. The work that you're doing is just absolutely invaluable, and it's going to make us a better place. And I'm just honored to be part of today. Chimigwech, I'm passing it over again, I believe, to Marissa.
Awesome. Thank you for those introductions, Ozma. So we'll get right into the panel. We have a number of questions for all of the panelists. It's going to be pretty open the way that this works. I'll pose a question, and then whichever panelist would like to start first, go ahead, answer the question, and then you can pass it off to another panelist that would like to answer the question. And feel free to take as much time as you'd like. I can't wait to hear all of your answers and the conversation that we have from this. So the first question, what are some of the biggest misconceptions about the trans community and being trans? And whoever would like to start first, just go for it. or I might choose someone. But Kelvin, it looks like your mic is off, so go for it.
Okay. So misconceptions in the trans community. One big topic that I'm always trying to give insight to towards people is hormone therapy. So I'm trans. I've been transitioning, actually, I realize almost 4 years now. And it's a big controversy some people feel with hormone replacement therapy. And I always just like to point out that it's not just for trans community people who are transitioning. It's used in many forms, like ladies, if you take birth control, that's a form of hormone replacement therapy. For men, if they have a hormone deficiency, they need testosterone shots, just like I do. And it's also too, like, people who perhaps are sick and they need hormone therapy because they don't produce their own hormones. It's used interchangeably for everyone. It's not just a transgender type medicine or practice. And I guess just on that topic too, surgery is another big talking point for the community, and like there's like a big stigma around it too. But it's like when a lady goes and gets a nose job, or men go in for plastic surgery, or whatever reason anyone wants anything, then it's deemed acceptable or normal, or it's not a big deal. But it's when I go in for surgery to help my dysphoria, then sometimes people are all like, oh, well, you're not respecting your body. And it's just like, well, you got to flip the perspective here. Anyway, yeah.
Going off of that with the surgery, another misconception is that we all inevitably get surgery. And that's not always true. Not every trans person goes through surgery. Not every trans person even wants surgery. Not every, some can't even afford it. So that idea to me is another just big misconception that we all get it inevitably.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that really plays into this idea that there's just one way to be a trans person, and that you have to look a specific way to be trans or do specific things to be part of the trans community. And that's absolutely not true. Trans people come in all different shapes, sizes, abilities, races, and appearance. And that's totally okay. They're just like the rest of the population in that way. There's huge variability.
Yeah, exactly. Building off on that point. It's you can't just fit all trans people into the same box. They're all not the same person. It's not just a stereotype. We're from everywhere, from all aspects of life, and every trans person is unique, different. You get trans women, trans men, but you also get non-binary people, and the experience is totally different for everyone. You get people whose transitioning is a social one as well as a physical one. But then you just get people who purely have a social one. And yeah, even concerning surgeries and hormone replacement therapies, like I personally would want surgery, but hormone replacement therapy sounds good to me. So it very much depends on the person, for sure.
Awesome. Thank you all for your answers. Before we move to the next question, any other comments that anyone wants to add on to that?
Yeah. When it comes to your identity, ultimately it's you who know who you are. And sometimes you might be really certain about it, and sometimes you might not be. And sometimes it's a changing process. So for a lot of trans people, coming to terms with their identity isn't always just at one point in life and that they're fixed on it. Sometimes at a certain age, you might feel, oh, I'm not trans, and maybe I'm just very effeminate. But then a couple of years later, you might think, oh, I'm coming to terms with being non-binary and stuff like that. So there is a certain maybe fluidity and change of mind that can happen over time. It's never just fixed in place. So it's important to realize when some person, if their identity is one point in time something, but then later on they might come to terms with something else. I think you need to just respect that people don't always know themselves entirely, and it's a changing process. And it's not just for trans people, but even people in general. You're never certain entirely of what you want. It can always change.
Thanks for sharing, Dylan. I think that's a really important message to keep in mind, especially as we go off throughout our day and the rest of our lives with so many things happening so quickly in the world, that things can be fluid, and that's okay to be fluid, and that's often how we live our lives. So thank you for that reminder. On to the next one. How do you deal with hypocrisy against the trans community? This is a pretty loaded question. I have faith in our panelists.
Cam, your mic's off.
I'm trying to think. I don't know I don't know how to answer it. It is such a loaded question right now. Hypocrisy against the trans community.
I think this kind of goes on.
There's so much of it.
That's true. That's true. I think this kind of goes on like some of the points we made before also, like, for example, how people have certain surgeries for trans people. It might be viewed as like, mutilating your body or changing it in a way that can't be reversed. But the same applies for cis people too, like getting a nose job or a top surgery or something like that. It's different. It's a different perspective on different people, which is discriminatory inherently.
What I always find interesting is when a person finds out that you're trans, they have this, it's usually a big reaction when a person finds out, and not always is it a negative one, but usually it's a big reaction. And the funnier ones that you get is when you're like, oh my God, I have no idea you were trans. But it's like, I think Kelvin mentioned this before, but I had no idea you were cis. So it's like, what's the deal? Like, you don't need to do that. So it's just, I don't know. The whole idea that, I'm trying to figure out how to word this. It's a delicate subject. So it's just, when you're asked that you're like trans and like they go off with like all these questions, like, oh, what's your life like? Like my life must be so crazy. And it's like, my life got normal when I came out. That's,
You got calmer, more.
yeah, absolutely. And it was it exactly. And it was something that like brought like it brought me out because I wasn't myself for so many years. And just this whole idea that suddenly like my life is crazy, it's like, what?
Yeah. If any, I always sometimes I say to people, my transition is probably more of a transition for you than it is for me. Like, like I'm looking different as like the years go on and my transition gets farther, but in terms of feelings or my life, no, I'm good. I'm not shocked anymore.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. In terms like for hypocrisy for me, like a lot, like obviously coming out as trans or confiding in people or being openly trans, that's very important, but a lot of the times it puts you in a very, very vulnerable place. So sometimes there's moments, even like I can find myself, I don't feel 100% comfortable. And one of those very vulnerable moments is, if you have to go to the doctor, if it's a new doctor. So I recently just got a new family doctor and I was very nervous about having to go in and, everything's going good. And they go through your medical history. And then it's just like sometimes disclosing that you're transgender to the medical community can be a hit or miss, because you don't know what their feelings are on it, unfortunately, because we're still growing education for it. And how I like to make myself feel safe or protect myself or deal with the hypocrisy aspect of the community is I always like to bring a buddy to my appointments, whether it's my fiance or just a friend, just anyone. Hey, what are you doing today? You want to come to the doctor's appointment? And they're like, why? And I'm like, well, in case they're transphobic, then you can like witness the problem. So they're like, yeah, sure. And like, I'm saying it lightheartedly, but it does make a big difference when you have someone in your corner, when you're just trying to feel the water, because it does suck when you get,
That's a big deal.
Yeah. But I don't know if that counts, but that's kind of what I do, and like physically can do for myself in those situations.
Yeah, exactly. So despite having to deal with it all the time, these moments of hypocrisy, sometimes you just have to nip it in the bud, but sometimes you can use it as a way to really highlight certain issues. And ultimately, when you gain the allyship of other people, other trans people themselves, or allies of the trans community, it helps really put us in the right direction towards getting rid of all these thought processes of people and misconceptions and all that. So I think ultimately just uniting together against it really helps.
I think that's kind of where my answer was coming from. I think community is kind of how I would deal with this, is leaning back on people I know are safe people who are supportive people, recognizing that I don't have the energy to do this all by myself. Like, it is an emotional journey. It's an emotional labor, educating people about transphobia, educating people of the basics of like Trans 101. That's a lot of work. And sometimes I'm happy to do that work, but it depends on the setting. And there's sometimes when I'm just exhausted from doing that work and need to tap the shoulder of somebody and say, can you help me out here? Even if that's basic things like pronouns, saying, can you be an advocate for people using the right pronouns for me? If you catch somebody who is maybe misgendering me, can you just give them a gentle reminder? That is even something that's really helpful. So just having allies on your side.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing. Now onto a bit of a lighter question and a happier question, to share some more positive things. What is one of your best memories or experiences of being a trans person? Again, very loaded, but I think in a more positive way.
I think one of the more positive memories that like I remember coming out as trans to a few friends, and I remember like it was just such a positive thing. Like everybody was just like, oh my God, you're so much happier now. And I remember I hold on to that. I think that's like probably like the most positive experience that I had, actually was like coming out to like close friends that like realized like, wow, this makes sense.
Mine's kind of the same. Sorry, I'm just reading that. Okay. Mine's similar. I remember, as Dylan mentioned, like coming into your transition or trying to figure yourself out, for anyone, not even just trans people, just growing up, you're trying to figure out who you are as a person, your likes, your dislikes, how you identify. So I had that process for a few years. When I grew up in a very sheltered household, so I didn't even know there was such a thing as sexuality. I thought, you just marry the prince and then you live happily ever after. Like, I didn't know about all this. So, when I was learning, it was mind blowing. So anyway, it took me a few years to really understand that I actually was transgender, and I realized I was struggling, but I was like, oh, but that must not be me. I don't know. And I'd be at the gym and I'm on my treadmill and I'm looking around and I'm like, well, I don't know, I'm not that guy, and I don't look like that guy, and I don't act like that guy. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm not transgender. And I remember I almost fell off the treadmill because it never occurred to me that I'm like, well, no, like, you can be a guy, but like, you can just be yourself. Like, you don't have to be those people. Like, you're just you. So that's, and I was like, oh my God, I'm transgender. I had no clue. And I remember thinking about all my childhood memories and all my experiences and just every little thing. And it all made sense. And I was like, wow, like an entire 25 years of these thoughts in the back of my head that kind of always made me feel a little bit like out of place, but I didn't know why. And it all just clicked. Like, why did I ever want to wear a dress? Why was it a freak out every time my parents tried to get me in one? Or when I was swimming, why would I always want, well, why can't I just wear shorts like those guys? I don't understand. Or like, just all these little tiny thoughts in my head. And I was like, holy cow, it makes sense, because I don't know. Yeah. Just before society put on those pressures of what you're supposed to act like when you're a certain gender, it's, anyway, so that was kind of my moment. It was just like, oh, thank God, I finally figured it out.
Yeah. I'll go next on that. Well, probably one of the most validating experiences for me was back in my country, in Sri Lanka. Well, it's not a country it's pretty backward in terms of queer rights and everything, social stigmas, all that stuff. But yeah, for I think my bio, it's mentioned I was into cosplay, and I went to this one kind of convention, Comic-Con kind of, and I wanted to cosplay a certain character who was kind of effeminate, androgynous looking, and that was but the character still being canonically male was the justification I explained to my mom on why I should be able to cosplay this character, and she should have no qualms about it. So I did, and then my whole outfit was still pretty effeminate, and a lot of people thought, they first saw me, thought I was a girl, which is something I try to do. I'm non-binary, but my expression is very effeminate. So having so many people just validate me like that, and me not even like forcing it, just happening it organically, that was an amazing experience for me that I won't ever forget. So yeah, that was a highlight of my life for me, really a real turning point.
I think for me, like, there's lots of best or good memories, but I think seeing myself represented in books I was reading was really important. Just this idea that I wasn't alone and being able to relate to somebody else. It's kind of, Calvin, very similar to this idea, like, you didn't have the language to describe yourself, and then getting that language and seeing that representation was just so eye-opening. And I think that's actually one of the reasons why I think panels like this are so important, is because it is that representation piece and letting people know that they're not alone out there.
When I just going off what Krista said there, one of the biggest things was, I'm not really good at social media computers, but I remember when I first started researching what being transgender was, you came across there was social media accounts, and like on Instagram specifically, and people would document themselves transitioning. And I remember following, just thinking at first, oh, this is cool, I'm going to follow their story. But then I realized after a while, I caught myself actually feeling jealous when I was going, and I was seeing these people going through this like life-changing event, and I was like, man, that is so cool that they're able to do that. I had no idea. Like, that's wild. And then like the language, but then the visuals of me actually seeing people's stories unfold, it was like, I guess, yeah, very empowering in a way where it was like, wow, like that could be me. I didn't know that was actually possible. So that was super cool too.
Very similar experience I had as well. Like so similar. I was like looking at all these people and they're transitioning and just thinking like, oh my goodness, you can do that?
And you can do that? Yeah.
You can just do that. And then it was like, I just did it one day and it was like,
Yeah, and
well,
then
did you look at that?
that's such a good, yeah. And then I just did it one day and here we are.
Here we are.
Yeah. So true.
Awesome. Thank you all. Okay, next question. So this is an advice-based question. What tips do you have for anyone starting to socially transition? It can be physical too, but it's up to you.
Yeah, on that, I think it is important to realize that it doesn't have to be something that happens very immediately, very fast. I think it's very much a process. Don't have to rush into things as much as you might like to, but take it slowly. Start to maybe tell initially the people you trust the most, that you know for certain that they would accept you for who you are, despite you coming out as someone else that they didn't know this whole time, kind of. And keep your expectations in place too, especially if you're starting to physically transition. I know, yeah, you see a lot of other trans people who kind of extraordinarily change during their transition, and sometimes it can be a little maybe putting yourself off, kind of like you might get a little jealous, basically what I'm saying. But it takes time. It's a journey for sure. And another important point is your safety, especially depending on where your circumstances are, the environment you're in. You might not have quite the welcoming one. You have to be concerned for your safety. You might be in a place where your parents, for example, if you're still living with them, they might kick you out just for who you are. So it's really important to plan ahead and always put yourself first. And you wouldn't want to suppress yourself. It's not a good thing, but make sure you do it in a way that puts your safety at the highest priority, for sure.
Going off what Dylan said, especially for safety, you know, you try and plan ahead on, you know, that kind of stuff. But like, just so everyone knows, I don't know how helpful it is. It's just, there's a lot on the, like, there's a big trans community on the internet. And like, I remember I'm a big Reddit user, and just anywhere on the internet though, like it's just an insane amount of support for trans folk. And, you know, you go on there and people will say like a story and it's just, you know, asking for advice, or they're just saying a story to, you know, they had a bad encounter with their parents or their friends or the doctor, and they just, you know, they're just voicing what happened in order to feel heard. And the amount of support that you see in those comments is just wild. Sometimes I see a question and I'm like, your doctor said what? And I'm like, spend an hour typing out like an educated message, because I'm like, don't you dare let that person make you feel like that. Like, that is not acceptable. You know, I'm so sorry, like reach out, whatever. It's just to make sure, like, it's just if you need to feel heard or validated, and, you know, you're feeling isolated, there is some, I don't know, I find some comfort in hearing, you know, complete strangers just try and, you know, talk you up and say like, no, that's not acceptable. So anyway, yeah, that's just for what off Dylan said. Yeah, so socially transitioning tips. I was in college when I started transitioning, so I was like, cool, this is a super socially intense time of my life. Not that it's ever relaxed, I guess, but anyway, I was really nervous about, because I was deciding to medically transition, and you know, some things would change. I got a little hairier and stuff. So I was like, okay, I feel like I'll be more comfortable if I just blurt it out, and hopefully it's just received okay. And I decided to just privately email all my professors and just say, hey, just so you know, I'm actually medically transitioning. If you can just not refer to me as a girl in class, that'd be super. And if you can just use this name instead, awesome. And then I reached out privately to a few of the friends that I hung out with at school. And turns out actually one of my closest friends that I hung out with at school was trans too. And I had no clue. They're like, so, hey, if you need any advice, like, you know, your friendly neighborhood friend trans guy. And I was like, oh my God, that's awesome. Thank God, I have so many questions. So that worked out for me. But anyway, yeah, social transition tip. If you're in school, email your professors privately. It helps. I don't know. Anyway, Tam, you're unmuted.
My tips would definitely very similar to Dylan's, but definitely having somebody close to you. I would say definitely tell somebody that you really, really trust, if you feel comfortable doing that. But that was my biggest help, was having somebody to talk to calm me down when things were very difficult. Because things do get difficult as a trans person. That's just the reality of being trans, unfortunately, in this day and age. Not everyone still sees eye to eye on this. So with that, there will be disagreements, and having somebody beside you to go to always rely on for anything, even just a shoulder to cry on once in a while. I mean, it's such a big help when you're transitioning, because you don't lose sight of your goal. And that person will help you get to your goal, because they care about you. They care about your goal just as much. They want to see you happy. They already know just how happy you get. So it's just having that. I can't stress how important it is.
I think for me, one of the tips I have is like, don't feel like you need to come out to everybody all at once. You can do it bit by bit. Find spaces where it's okay for you to be trans, that you have that support in, and it's okay if there's spaces that you're not out. I think that goes back to Dylan's point around do what's safe for you, because it's not always safe to be out everywhere. Like, point blank, it's not safe in some cases.
Thanks everyone for sharing. Kelvin, I see your mic's off. Do you have anything else to add, or?
Oh, no, sorry, I just forgot to mute it.
Okay, cool. Okay, next question. What barriers have you faced accessing healthcare as a trans person? I know we've touched a lot on this already, so feel free to please keep expanding on that. I know there's a lot to talk about on this topic.
I mean, I think we're all in the SUE. And so one of the challenges is the lack of healthcare providers in the SUE who are trained and educated on trans issues. There just simply is not very many of them. There's not very many who will prescribe hormones, for example, or who are even willing to have a conversation about that. So I think that is a huge barrier for folks who are in Sault Ste. Marie or who are in northern communities, rural communities. Huge barriers just getting access to a doctor.
Yeah, even go ahead. Oh, okay. So yeah, I mean, for me, I struggled finding a doctor myself. In Sault Ste. Marie, I had a doctor who wouldn't speak to me about my issues, and essentially I was just like, okay, so if you're not going to help me, I'm going to have to find another doctor. And we parted ways, and eventually I did find another doctor who will talk to me about my problems. So, but that alone was, I believe, a 3-year process. Nearly 4. I had to go to walk-in clinics for a long time to get any prescription for other issues. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a struggle for like accessing healthcare for trans people, that's for sure.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's very hard to access it. especially in Sault Ste. Marie or up north. I remember I didn't have a family doctor, and I went to a walk-in clinic, and I was just like, well, I hope the doctor I get is nice. I don't know, because I'm about to just blurt this out. And I don't know if I have a guardian angel looking after me, but she was very nice. And she said she's going to try and call around and find any doctors who are willing, and help me get on a wait list. But it was from the first time I met this walk-in clinic doctor to actually seeing a doctor that would prescribe me hormones or consider it or like see me through the process. It was about 1.5 years, 2 years. So you just got to have like an insane amount of patience, and just keep trying. Unfortunately, like you just kind of, it's worth the wait, I'll tell you, but it's very frustrating. And that's just something that hopefully can get better over time. I don't know.
Yeah, especially that. So the two barriers I feel like are probably the most apparent to me trying to get specific healthcare is money and finding doctors who are actually able and willing to do that. So yeah, especially depending on the area you're in, you might just not have that access to doctors who are willing to prescribe hormones, or there just might be doctors who are not experienced, who are not trained in providing that sort of healthcare. It's very important. I think it's up to you also to be careful and to make sure you're getting a doctor who knows what they're doing, at least trying to help them do that. Because sometimes they might be putting you on a process that might hurt you later on. You need to do a lot of research on your own as well, for sure. It's major stuff that you'll be putting into your body for the changes you'd want, but of course you don't want the bad stuff too. And yeah, especially in certain countries, you won't even get that access because of, well, the current systems in place, the stigmas and all that stuff. And yeah, well, transitioning itself can be a pretty costly, hefty process that might require thousands or hundreds, so forth of dollars and stuff just to get there, just for hormone replacement therapy, all types of surgeries, bottom surgery, top surgery, etc. It's definitely a process that you have to dedicate yourself to if you really want to get to that place, or you can really truly be who you are, for sure.
I'd say one of the other kind of barriers or challenges with the healthcare system is it's set up to be very gendered. And so you have like women's reproductive health, men's reproductive health. And if you don't fit in one of those boxes, it can be really hard to access services. You get misgendered a lot. It can be emotionally exhausting to go to your doctor and be seeking reproductive health care, but not wanting to fit in that box. And trying to explain over and over again that, no, I'm seeking this healthcare because I have those body parts, but I don't identify as a woman. That simple, but very difficult to get that message across over and over again within the healthcare system.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a big, what is it? I remember, well, I have a lot of like cis lady friends who obviously go to their gynecologists and stuff, and some of them have issues with their uteruses and all that. And it's, even just to them, it's like, well, you might want kids, so we're not going to do anything about it until you're like 40. And they're like, no, I already have a kid, or I don't want to have kids. And they're like, well, you might change your mind. And you're like, okay, well, my body, so don't talk to me about, like I've thought about it. It's not like I'm just coming in here on a Tuesday because I'm bored. Anyway, yeah, so yeah, reproductive rights are pretty, as a trans guy, a pretty binary looking trans guy. Yeah, I remember I talked to my like new family doctor because I'm in the process of getting a hysterectomy. He's like, I don't need those parts. I'm not doing anything with it. I'm telling you, nothing coming in this easy bake. Okay. So I mentioned to her, because she saw that my endocrinologist, the doctor who oversees my hormones, put in an application for me to get my hysterectomy. And so she's like, oh, I see you're in the process. And I was like, yeah. She goes, well, like, are you sure? Like, maybe you might change your mind. And I straight up looked at her and I was like, look at me in the eyes, look at my face, and then look, no, like, thank you. But like, don't assume just because I got those bits and pieces that I'm using them. Like, I'm not, and I can guarantee you I am not interested in having a baby in this body. And she's like, okay, I'm just saying. I was like, I know, but there's a time and place, and that wasn't the time or place. So yeah, it is just like the reproductive care. It's just like, it doesn't matter. Like, it's just, yeah, it's just like, I get it, but no, we're moving forward. It's not like the 1800s here. We don't need babies to survive. So yeah, anyway, I don't know if that's relevant, but that just made me think of that, Krista, when you said it. So
I think that's super relevant, Kelvin. And thank you for sharing with humor too, talking about easy bakes and stuff like that. I think it's nice to have a little bit of humor, especially when some of these conversations are a little bit heavier. Okay, next one, along the lines of our first one, or the previous one, I should say. What tips do you have for accessing healthcare as a trans person?
Be persistent. Be as persistent as you can.
yeah,
Never
times be annoying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, as soon as you start, like, you're like, if you hit a roadblock, just keep hitting it. Just keep nicking at it, and you will eventually pass that roadblock, because it is a long journey. And as soon as you hit a roadblock, just don't stop. Don't let it get you down, because they will happen. But just be persistent and keep going.
Yeah, if you're pursuing this, you're doing it because you love yourself and you want to provide yourself with this opportunity. And just remind you, like, when you're down and you're frustrated, like, because you're gonna have those moments where you're like, God, like, what is this? And then just keep going. Like, just remind yourself you're doing it because you love yourself, and that's, you just want to keep going with that. So unfortunately, be very patient and persistent and firm. Be very firm. Doctors will sometimes, if you don't get a good doctor, sometimes they won't be as supportive as they should be, and they'll like warp it to be like, well, I'm just a doctor, I'm here, it's not my opinion, it's just me concerning for you. And it's like, no, but you are mixing it in with your opinion, like, so it's just be very firm, like, who you are, and like, you're pursuing that, and that's like pretty cool thing. So don't lose sight of that.
Yeah, definitely. On that point, you have to be pushy about it. You have to be persistent. You can't leave it to someone else to do, because it is ultimately your own body, and you need to do what's right for what you believe in. So definitely make sure you yourself do as much research as possible. Make sure the doctor you do ultimately receive at least some part of the healthcare from, you ensure, or rather inform them at least of what's right for you, and because sometimes they just might not be well versed in trans care, and you need to make sure the doctor doesn't do the wrong thing to you either. Like I said before, you have to make sure you inform them of what exactly you want and how to go about it.
Yeah, you can't be afraid to educate them.
Yeah,
because I had this feeling like before that, oh, they're a doctor, they're super well educated, they must know a lot. But sometimes, well, even the field of healthcare, being a doctor, it's so vast. They just might not know everything that they should be knowing, especially if it's in something concerning like transgender healthcare. It's still something that a lot of doctors don't know about. So
a startling amount don't know much about. It's actually crazy. Another, like I mentioned, there's a lot of people on social media and stuff. Now they're not doctors, but I'm saying, you know, like it's trans people know a lot about their transition. So it's like, you know, if you feel safe or you know someone and, you know, like ask, you say, hey, do you mind if I ask you some questions about transitioning, or, you know, because they're not going to lie to you. They're going to be honest because they're going through it and they want to be supportive and they want to make sure you are completely aware of what you're going into. And it could really help clarify a lot of misinformation out there. I remember I was very nervous about, I loved myself before my transition, but I felt like I knew myself more. Like I was very nervous about taking hormones because I was worried, you know, what if it changes me, or what, like I heard you can be moody, or I heard you can, like, I don't know, just go very emotional, or just negative things that aren't, like, I'm talking about emotional reactions, not like physical. Like my doctor monitors all that. Like again, like Dylan said, you got to make sure that the doctor is doing their part. But I remember once I started testosterone, I was angrier before I started testosterone. Like I felt very calm and my anxiety went from here to like right down. It was insane. And I was like, is it working right? Because like I thought I was gonna be all like hot and bothered and like super like, don't touch my car, man, or I don't know, just silly. And but no, I'm a lot calmer now. You can ask a lot of my friends. I was like before. But anyway. Yeah. So if you know some trans friends, or, you know, just you're seeing someone's story, like reach out, just say, hey, you know, if you don't mind, I'm thinking about my own transition, or I'm curious, like, do you have like time I can talk with you? That for me was very helpful. For social, like, because when I was talking to my doctor, they told me all those things, you know, what to be aware of, but they don't actually tell you all the things that are awesome about it, you know, because that's not their job. It's not their job to hype you up, pump you with hormones, you know, like they're like, okay, but you got to think of all the consequences. But make sure you give yourself time while you're in the process of getting healthcare to take moments to appreciate all the positives that would come from it too.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for sharing. And on to our next question, and I believe our last question for the panel. What 3 words would you choose to highlight what it means to be trans? Again, very loaded. Only three words.
I'll go ahead on the first then. Well, one word I've used to describe that is freedom. It's very much the freedom to be yourself, to know what you identify as and express that. To have freedom to be who you are. That's really important to me as being trans non-binary person. I shouldn't have to feel suppressed. I shouldn't have to feel put in a box. I shouldn't have to feel shunned, or rather feel like I should suppress myself as a result of being shunned. Freedom is really important in that aspect. It's definitely a core. Another word I would use is probably just being unyielding. Not giving in to the barriers that are put in front of you, to face adversity and to come out stronger than ever before from that. If you give in to barriers that might be in your way, you'll never really reach the point in time where you can be who you are. I mean, sometimes you do have to put your own safety into that consideration, but there are the little things you can do just to make sure you make that little step, that little milestone in that journey is really important. So being unyielding for sure. And then the last word is a very simple one, just happiness. By having the freedom to be who you are, by coming out of adversity, being stronger, and then just being happy with yourself, being happy to be yourself. that's ultimately like kind of the end goal, or rather something you always want to achieve, want to get to when being a trans person, pretty much. Yeah.
I think enlightening is definitely a word I would use. You know, that I think we talked about it before, but that initial like 20 years of memories suddenly coming off when you figure out that you're trans. So it's extremely enlightening to like who you are as a person. And I would say another word is trying to think.
There are so many words out there. How do you
There's
choose?
so many words, and they're all floating through my brain right now. Enlightening, beautiful, I would say, because you get to see like the perspectives of things. You know, I spent a lot of my formative years being gendered as a male, and I experienced things as a male, and I did get to experience a lot of that, but that's very informative to who I am as a person, but it's not who I am. And I think that that's really important as well. Like it's a beautiful thing to like be able to like go back and like think, oh, that's why this person's acting like this, because they're probably going through something similar to this, which I know some of my friends were going through at the time. So that's another word for sure. And I would say that the last word is I don't want to say the wrong word now because I've taken so much time. It's going to be anticlimactic at this point.
Is that the word? No, I'm joking.
No. I would say the last word I'm going to go with is empowering. Because when you really figure yourself out, there's really like, we talked about it before with being persistent, but like once you find it out, there's really nothing that can stop you. And that's something that to me is truly empowering about being trans. So those are my 3 words for sure.
Okay, I'll go because I'm unmuted. Okay, so I have 3 words. My first word I put was authentic. I don't know, it's just, if you decide to go, or like not decide, you don't decide to be trans, but if you want to go forth and start sharing that with the world, like you're making a decision to just be your most authentic self, because you're like, you know what, after however many years or however long you've been in your head about it, you're finally like, you know what, screw it. I was gonna swear there, but I didn't, so that's good. You know, like I'm going to be myself, and I'm going to start telling people, and I'm going to, you know, it's going to be hard and it's scary, but like I'm choosing to do that. And like, there's no other form of like, that's what being authentic is. And that's pretty cool. My other word was exciting. You know, it's scary, but scary as hell, but it's extremely exciting once you get the ball rolling. And it's quite the experience, you know, like Tan was mentioning, you have all those memories before you decided to start sharing or confiding in the world that you're trans, and you're beginning to be like, okay, wow, like this is insane, like this is exciting, that everything's starting to make sense, and I can start sharing that with the world, and start like helping articulate, like, because again, I always say it's more of a transition for everyone else than it is for me. Like I'm friggin' relaxed, I'm good, everything makes sense now. But you know, the whole world was perceiving me as a girl. Like they didn't know what was in my head or what I felt behind every single thing that's ever happened to me since. So it's like, now I'm deciding to share all that with you. So it's like, y'all transitioning, not me. I'm cool. just kidding. But and then my last word was brave. I mean, pardon my language, I don't know if it's appropriate, but it's like, you got to have a lot of balls to be able to do this. So, you know, like, that's something you shouldn't diminish. Like, that's pretty cool. And honestly, like, once you are able to like pass that hurdle, it's just like, if you can do that, you can do anything. So just take that in mind and help use that to, like, you know, be like, no, I'm brave as hell. I got a lot of balls, whether you do or not. It's just an expression. But you're just, I don't know, yeah, you're super brave for choosing to do that. And I think that's pretty cool. And use that, you know, that's your weapon. So
I don't know how to follow all those great words. And authenticity was my first word too. I think, which is totally okay. I think it's cool that both of us came up with that.
yeah.
My second word, I think, is journey. It's a process. It's going to take time and learning stuff about yourself, but also about the people around you through that journey. And my third word, I think, is human. Trans people are people and deserve to be treated with respect and just like everybody else in many ways. And so I think it's important to remember that we're all human beings.
Thanks, everyone. I was going to recap some of the answers before going on to the question and discussion period, but I think if I tried to recap it, I would be recapping everything because I can't pick and choose any one thing to point out or to go over again. So that's a good thing. Thank you for all of the things that you've shared and making it so difficult just to choose a few things to reiterate. So now, if everyone's okay with it, we'll go on to a bit of a question and discussion period. And we actually already have one question from the chat. I'm going to go up and find. So the question was from Megan. How can we signify or make apparent that we are an ally or a safe space or person? I want to make sure on a daily basis that I am making everyone feel welcome, comfortable, and safe. And I'll direct this question towards the panel, but I think it's really important to have those that are participating feel free to chime in with your answers as well. So for this part, if you could just raise your hand, and Ozma, I see you have your hand raised. So I'll go ahead and you can answer first, and then if anyone else, whether it's from the panel or any other participants, wants to add in with anything they have to say, feel free.
Thanks, Marissa. I actually wasn't going to answer Megan's question, but I guess indirectly I am. Well, first of all, I just want to acknowledge all of the panelists today and thank you for the time that you've taken. Every time I get the opportunity to listen and to learn, it just helps me to be a better person walking away and to be a better ally. And I know that for many of you, you have so much ahead of you in terms of the challenge and as Krista said, some of the emotional work that you're trying to do to help others. And I just want to acknowledge how important it is and how grateful we are to you for putting yourself here today and sharing with us. My comment is really for the people that are in the room participating alongside you. And I continue to stress with our community the importance of using voice, right? And that it should not be for one group to have to voice what they need or to educate or to do this really important work. We all have to own this if we're going to make the world a better place. And it's only collectively that we can make our community a safer, more inclusive, more accepting, welcoming place for everyone. And I loved somebody talked about we're all human beings, right? And we can be so mean to each other and so cruel to each other. Watch what's happening around the world. And it's mind-boggling to think that human beings can be so cruel to other human beings or to others that are on this planet. So I think we have to use our voice. And my hope for Algoma University, whether you're an employee or a student or a graduate or an alumni, and it's so beautiful to see alumni with us today, and welcome, Ali. The work that we do in this community matters. And, the stuff that you've talked about in terms of healthcare, like, oh my gosh, right? I know it's difficult, but to hear your stories, I am just flabbergasted, right? That you can't get the expertise that you need for just basic human needs. So, you've given us a lot to think about today. And, I would love to talk to you a little bit more about even what Algoma can continue to. We have so much work to do. And I know you know this, but I'd love to continue the dialogue to really think deeply about what is our next step. And I do want to also acknowledge Krista, the work that you're doing, Krista, to educate and to help us learn as an institution is critical. And I know it's a lot of work, and I just want you to know how much we appreciate it. I'll stop talking there now, but thank you all so much.
Thanks, Ozma, for sharing. And back to our question. Do any of the panelists have anything they'd like to add, or any of the participants in the Zoom audience like to share anything about how to be a better ally or signify that you're a safe person to go to? You can also answer in the chat.
For me, I mean, I don't know, I can't really articulate it. One very simple thing that it's becoming more of a habit is just when you put, your pronouns in your name. Like, I remember I used to work at the bank, and they came out with their name tags, and they had, oh, do you guys want to do the option to put your pronouns? And almost everyone was like, yeah, sure. And it was just super cool because, like, I wasn't out at work, like, so it was just kind of like, oh, cool, like, that's nice. Like, you're doing that just to make anyone feel inclusive. And because, I'm butchering that. But anyway, it's a very small thing, but having, like, on your email sign-offs or in your social medias or on your name tags at work or something, or your business cards, like, I don't know, it's super cool to see that. So then it takes the spotlight off us almost, where it's just like, oh, only trans people have to show their pronouns. Like, no, it's just a courtesy for everyone, and it's nice. It's nice to take the spotlight off of us.
Yeah, honestly, it's just been building up on what Kelvin said there. Sometimes it's just the basic, simple things. Is of course, using someone's pronouns, and even if you're a cis person, having your pronouns listed somewhere is just like, you're like acknowledging that people have different pronouns. And you can't always assume what they are. But honestly, just on an individual level, just like letting people know you're a safe space, you're a person they can trust, and all that. Honestly, sometimes just giving them a compliment. Like, for example, if they're a trans girl, they might just like you. You might compliment their makeup, or just say oh, you look so pretty today. Say it in a tasteful manner, of course, but sometimes the little things that just help trans people know that, oh, you're validating me, you're acknowledging me, and you're respecting me, and that's always great to hear, to know. Basically, simple things matter a lot.
I think also committing to ongoing education for yourself is a big one. You know how to use Google stuff when you have questions. Do not ask very personal questions to trans folks. You can do that research yourself. I think another one is really like that safe space question. If you see transphobia, call out transphobia. Don't wait for the trans person in the room to do it. You can do that as well.
Yeah, I've had a few times if people are not being cool, which is very rare. I'm very, very lucky for the experiences I've had, but like the few times, I remember I wouldn't even have to open my mouth. Like the other person would be like flying off the handle, being like, that's not okay. Like, this isn't acceptable. Like, you can either educate yourself or you can leave. Like, there's no space for that. And I remember being like, whoa, guys, like, it's not cool, but like, it's cool. Like, let's bring it down a little, like, let's talk or not talk, like, whatever. And they're like, no, that's not cool. We do not accept that. And I was like, okay, like, you guys do your thing. They're like, it bothers me. And I was like, okay, you do your thing. And I was like, but I mean, like, the hindsight of having that support is just like super cool. Like, doesn't even allow any room in your head to entertain like being down on yourself. So it's just, yeah, like, I don't know. So I guess be an ally, you hear something, go on blast, I guess, or you know what I mean though. It's just having those supportive people in your life like surprise you like that. You're like, wow, cool. So I don't know. Yeah.
Thanks everyone for sharing. Are there any folks that are in the audience or that are participating that would like to share about anything they've taken away from this and anything that they're going to do differently or continue to do to support trans folks after hearing all of the stories and experiences and tips? Feel free just to turn your mic on if you do. We have a pretty small group here.
Hey Marissa, it's Vivian here. I just want to sort of reiterate what I put in the chat. And, as we all strive to unlearn, right, all of the damaging assumptions and stereotypes that continue to prevail in the media and in society, I think it's really important also for those of us who are committed to being allies and accomplices. And hopefully, we will live to this label and do well and do good on this every single day. Is to, we will be making mistakes, and I know I've caught myself at some meetings where I have forgotten to introduce myself when I introduce myself in my language first, and I think about it and I say, oh my goodness, but I just have to be mindful and just continue to catch myself and just commit to do better the next time. So for me, that's a really positive way of looking at this, but also knowing that I'm doing it because I do want to make this space feel safer for folks. And I do want to recognize the humanity and the and all of the ways in which everybody should be appreciated and celebrated and respected and honored based on our own identities. So thank you so much. I really appreciate all these chats, and I thank you for sharing all of that lived experience with us.
Thanks for sharing, Vivian.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a comment on kind of concerning what was spoken about before, but yeah, just in general, I feel like assumptions can be really, really dangerous things to make. You can never, should never assume what you know about someone else. Sometimes you don't even know your own self to begin with, and making assumptions about other people is something you shouldn't do. You should really try and clarify, ask in a nice manner. Because at least in my experience, I might have interactions with people, and they might say, or like, they might have good intent, but sometimes it's the way they do it. Like, they might say, like, thanks, bro, or man, so forth. Other things I wouldn't want to be referred to as, and it's probably not the biggest deal, but it does chip away at me little by little. At the same time, like, I can't be telling every single person not to say that. So it can be tedious for me. It can also be tedious, like maybe I guess, to ask someone each and every time. But just be very careful with how you make assumptions, just in general, not even just concerning like trans people, just people in general. Always make sure your thoughts are educated, informed, and always think before you speak or do.
If I may add to what has been said here today, I would like to really thank the 2S LGBTQIPA committee for the great work you have done today in organizing both the flag raising and now this very educative panel discussion. There is really so much that needs to be learned as we move forward with the work that we are doing. And what I'm taking away with me today is that self-education that Krista talked about. There's a lot of literature and resources that is out there. And so let's make that a challenge to ourselves, to educate ourselves on what we need to know. And as I was listening to all the panelists today, what really struck me is recognizing that being transgender is not about how someone looks, and that being transgender is a state of existing as one's truth. So, because we do make a lot of unconscious conclusions in how we perceive, how we see people. So moving away from there and really being intentional on saying, I'll educate myself, I'll not take anything for granted. And if I need to ask, I'll go to the individual respectfully and ask. So thank you so much for the session today and for the great learning that we have all had. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. And just one more thing that I'd like to add as well. I think it's really important to bring these conversations into other spaces where it may not typically be talked about. For example, like I used to be a varsity athlete, and I'm very much so into athletics, things like snowboarding and stuff like that. And a lot of these topics and these discussions, like they don't really exist in those spaces unless queer trans folks bring them into those spaces, which is great. But as we talked about before, a lot of the work needs to be on the allies. So bringing these conversations into other spaces, like with your family members, with the people that you work out with at the gym, your hiking buddies, if you work in different fields that this may not be necessarily something that's discussed, bring that there, because it's great and lovely to have this be a big topic at the university and in academia, but what happens when we leave these spaces? These conversations need to continue, and like they should continue. It should be like a dinner time conversation that you have, like, oh, guess what I learned today? This is really neat. I heard these really cool people talk today. Let me tell you about their story and their experience and what they told me about their experiences in healthcare. Like, keep this going. Like, this should be like a daily conversation, not just a really cool event that we put on. I think it's really cool. But let's keep it up. Let's have really cool conversations every day and keep going with that.
Realized my mic was on.
Do you want to add something, Kelvin, or?
No, everything everyone says is great. Yeah, like you say, conversations. That's how everything moves forward. You know, we're just constantly having these conversations and trying to like create new patterns or new thought patterns. You're trying to have to unlearn all these things we've been socialized to just accept. And now we're helping people try and like challenge that and just say, well, no, there's more. So yeah, conversations.
Yeah, definitely on that point of unlearning, it's definitely a process to, well, you might learn something that you believe to be true for like so many years of your life, and then just have to believe it might be the opposite or it's different. It's a process, and you really have to consciously change your mind to take in that new information and make it a standard in your brain. It's hard for sure. It's a lot of work, but we're getting there. and make sure you put in the effort to get there as well. For sure.
And my Zoom crashed just for a second. So Dylan, I'm not sure if you're finished sharing, but I kind of missed the last bit of what you were saying. Okay.
Oh, just basically, yeah, like unlearning something that you had to that you were always set on or believed in your whole life, and then unlearning it, learning something completely different or opposite. It's a hard process. It's difficult. It's difficult. Like there is this, I believe, this psychology or some theory that if you believe in something for your whole life, and your whole life depends on that one thing, if there's information that contradicts that, you will be in denial, or just it'll be difficult to accept, and that kind of process. Yeah.
For sure. Thank you all for sharing. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add on before we wrap up? And I'll open up the space just a bit before we finish. No? All right. Well then, I'd like to thank all of the panelists for speaking today and sharing their experiences, and doing so with enthusiasm, with humor, and in a very genuine and heartfelt way. Thank you very much for that, and for the organizers as well. Krista, I know you've put a lot of work in this. Dylan too. It's really cool to see you grow into your role as queer rep, and hear some of the powerful things that you've said today, especially starting with the flag raising this morning to some of the things that you've said on the panel. And Tam and Kelvin, thank you for joining today. It's really nice to meet you. I feel like I want to be friends with you, and I think that's a really cool thing to take away from this panel. So thank you for joining and sharing all of the words of wisdom that you have. And then for everybody that's joined us here today, whether you're a faculty member, staff, administration, community member, alumni, wherever you're coming from, thank you for joining us in this space today. I hope that you've learned something. I hope that there are some things that you're going to take away from this and continue to carry on in your everyday life, and that you continue to be an ally and an advocate. And if you'd ever like to join some of the work that we do at Algoma U and in the community, like we're always looking for people to join planning groups to actually put panels like this into action. Because as Krista said, sometimes it's a lot of work. A lot of times it's a lot of work, and the more the merrier. Of course, we'd love to have people help out, and otherwise just keep continuing these conversations. Hopefully we can hear more of them in the hallways and in the classrooms, and at the grocery store. So again, thank you all for joining today. We will be sending out some highlights from this panel and making the recording available as well. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. And if you're on campus today in Sault Ste. Marie, we do have some trans flag pins scattered around campus. So you'll see little baskets with some little posters around them. Feel free to pick up however many ribbon pins as you'd like.